If your mailbox is stuffed, like mine is, with solicitations for new magazines, then you'll be particularly impressed in our next segment, because it's about a magazine millions of us used to find in our mailboxes every week up until a year ago. Public Affairs Director Joe Abril has a new book which traces the beginning and end of Life, one of the great magazines of America.
I can't think of a book that tells its own story by its cover title than this one, The Best of Life. Of course, that famous logo, L-I-F-E, kind of says a great deal itself. This is actually a very popular best-selling book right now, which capsulizes, it's a pretty tough job to do, the best of the 36 years of Life magazine. With us now in montage is the editor of this particular book, Dave Scherman, and the managing editor of Life for almost 10 years, George Hunt, who's a fellow Floridian now, I understand, George, right?
That's correct, yes.
Retired or just?
Well, retired and pursuing hobbies and things like that.
Let's talk about this particular book. Why was this book published?
This book published, Davey? I think you should answer that question.
Well,
It's his idea.
We
Right.
suspended publication on a Friday, and then Friday night I got so unhappy about the suspension of publication that I called the managing editor, Ralph Graves, and I said, let's put out a book of all the best pictures. It was just a wild idea, but it was a wild idea that caught on right away, and within 2 or 3 days I had a staff, and we were off and running, Joe.
Now, you were telling me, I think the book has almost sold 1 million
The
copies
book
already.
will have sold pretty near 1 million copies by the end of the year. It sold about 850,000 copies as of right now.
Well, I think the worst thing to do is try and talk about Life. We should look at some of the pictures that are in the magazine. So you kind of give us a running narration, Dave,
All right,
what we're going to
and
see.
a few of the famous pictures, like this one here of Graham Jackson in Atlanta when Roosevelt FDR died and was taken away from Warm Springs, and this chief petty officer was playing Going Home on his accordion. This great picture of Hitler dancing his so-called jig. I don't know whether it was a real dance or not, but it was a newsreel clip, Joe, and it sort of connoted what was going on in Hitler's mind at the time with the fall of France of 1940.
Now, let me just address myself to that a minute. I've seen the newsreel clips a lot. He made one stamp
He
with
made
his
one
foot.
stamp, and it was on a loop, and it looked like he was doing a
Right,
dance.
and they
This,
caught
of
it.
course, is Bill Epridge's famous picture of Bobby Kennedy's assassination in the kitchen of the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles. I guess the reason why it's a great picture in one way is because of the lighting, and the lighting is by a CBS television cameraman who was standing just behind Mr. Kennedy when it happened, Senator Kennedy, when it happened. This is Neil Armstrong, as we all remember, the first man on the moon, and shot by Buzz Aldrin, his mate, and Buzz Aldrin's own figure is reflected in the faceplate of Neil Armstrong's spacesuit there.
Right.
There are fads, and Life made fads. We'd run a picture like this of a telephone booth being stuffed by 22 guys in Northern California, and a couple of weeks later, everybody in the country was stuffing telephone booths and Volkswagens to see how many people they could get into the shop.
This was the first stuffing.
That was the first stuffing, right. This is kind of a tour de force, and it showed the lengths that photographers would go to. George Silk had to get a good surfing shot, so he attached a camera on the front of the surfboard, and there's a string going to that Nick Beck's left hand, and just when Nick was hanging 10, he pulled the string and shot his own picture, which was kind of a memorable shot. And this is Johnny Dominus's famous animal confrontation. It's a leopard about to eat a baboon. It's part of Dominus's year-long Great Cats of Africa story. And just before this picture was made, both the leopard and the baboon ran through Johnny's legs when he was about to shoot the picture. Another shot by Bill Epridge of a motorcycle race in Barstow, California, which started out as kind of a lark, and it wound up by being a big cause célèbre of environmentalists against racing motorcycles in Northern California, and I think it caused a ban. The picture was taken from a helicopter, in case you're wondering how he got that angle on it. Another picture of Johnny Dominus is quite different from his animal picture. This is a picture of Woodstock Nation a couple of years ago, and it's a picture of a 400,000 kid gathering where there were no fights, no busts, no trouble, and it was, in the words of Dominus, the photographer, one of the greatest events he ever covered. And Larry Burroughs, I guess our most courageous photographer, he was one of the very few people killed at war working for Life. Shot this picture a few months before he himself was killed. It was shot in the DMZ in Vietnam, and for my money, is the best picture we have in the book. It fulfills all the requirements of a great picture.
Well, you know, seeing these pictures, of course, must have been a hard job to pick out. How many pictures do you imagine were published in those 36 years of life?
Well, George and I were talking about that the other night. About 180,000 pictures were published in Life. Not as many as you'd think. Life published an awful lot of words,
Right.
millions and millions of words. And George and I were talking the other night. The best of Life really includes those words.
I guess if you multiply that by, what, 8,000, you'd have the number of pictures that were shot for Life.
But why does a Life die? I don't understand that. New magazines coming out every day, and one of the great magazines goes under.
Well, I think that your big magazines, starting with Collier's, Look, the Post, and finally Life, died because of the basic philosophy that set them off in the first place, which is what we call the numbers game, in which a magazine would offer, in order to attain numbers in circulation, would offer low bargain rates to the subscriber. Eventually, and that placed the burden to support the magazine on the advertiser, which meant advertising rates had to be very high. And in Life's case, finally the advertisers said, no sir, we won't do it anymore, because television is offering rates that are much cheaper. And finally, when Life bought the Saturday Evening Post, and that upped the circulation to almost 9 million, the advertisers would not accept the higher rates needed to support that added cheap circulation.
Right. Well, it's too bad. I think most people miss a magazine. I guess that's the highest achievement you can reach when people think of a magazine as more a part of their living than they do a commercial enterprise.
I think even the people at Time Inc., the management and the editors, were absolutely staggered and astonished by the amazing reaction around the world when Life died.
Well, do you think
and the
Life
impact on this book?
Is Life coming back, perhaps?
I think there's a distinct possibility that it'll come back in some form, and I hope on a more sensible financial footing that George talks about. I, for one, look forward to it.
Well, thank you both for being on Montage, and until Life does come back, you can relive it with the best of Life on sale at your newsstands. Montage will be back in just a moment.